The Puss in Boots. On his deathbed, a rich farmer divided up all his possessions and left them to his 3 sons. To the firstborn, he left his lands, his animals, and his house. To the second son, he left a windmill and a herd of sheep. And to the youngest, since he had no other possessions, he left only a cat. The 2 older brothers were quite satisfied with this arrangement, but the youngest was rather worried about how he would manage living with just a cat as an inheritance. Hoping to find a way to earn his keep, he set off with his cat for a faraway land. There he hoped to enter into the service of an important lord. During the trip, the young man realized that the cat his father had left him was no ordinary animal. Rather, he was the cleverest and most astute of creatures. So smart was the cat that he managed to procure food for his master every day and solved any problems that arose. When at last they reached their destination, the cat asked his master for the feathered hat and the tall riding boots that were in his luggage. The cat put on the hat and boots and immediately he set to work. He hunted the best hares and the fattest partridges in the region, and day after day he went to the palace to offer them to the king on behalf of his master, the Marquis of Carabas. So many gifts did the king receive that he was truly eager to meet the nobleman who so generously bestowed them, and whom he had only heard about through his fabulous cat. One hot summer afternoon, when the cat and his master were taking a refreshing swim in the river, the king and his daughter passed by in a magnificent horse-drawn carriage. The cat quickly hid the young man's shabby clothing and began to shout for help, claiming that thieves had stolen the clothing of the Marquis of Carabas. When the king heard this, he ordered one of his servants to return to the palace and fetch the best suit he could find for his friend the Marquis. Once he was dressed in the splendid suit, the young man ceremoniously greeted the king and his beautiful daughter, who immediately fell in love with him. "Come into our carriage," the king offered. The Marquis very gladly sat next to the princess, whose face reflected her great beauty and happiness. Meanwhile, the astute feline, the cat, went from field to field, visiting the farmers who worked the land, asking everyone he met to say that the lands belonged to the Marquis of Carabas, his master, who was engaged to be married to the king's daughter. Everything turned out as the cat had planned, and the king readily approved the marriage of his daughter and the rich young Marquis. Next, the cat went to visit a very impressive castle in the region, which was owned by a terrible ogre. He requested an audience with the ogre. Cleverly, the cat said that he had come from a faraway land just to visit the famous ogre, whose many prodigious talents were spoken of far and wide. The ogre was so pleased with the compliments of his guest that to entertain and further impress him, he began to transform himself, first into a lion, then into a tiger, and then into other fierce animals. The clever cat pretended to tremble with fear at each of the ogre's transformations. Before long, he asked the ogre, "Can you turn yourself into a mouse?" "Of course," exclaimed the ogre with pride. "Just watch." And in a flash, the ogre turned into a tiny mouse with a long tail and curly whiskers. The cat hastily pounced on the mouse, killed it with his sharp teeth, and gobbled it up. When the king's carriage arrived at the courtyard of the palace, accompanied by his best pages and soldiers, The cat was waiting, happy to grant his master another one of his favors. "My king and lord," exclaimed the cat with an elegant bow, "you are always welcome at the castle of my powerful master, the Marquis of Caraba." The king was amazed to see the magnificent mansion, as big and as luxurious as his own palace. "Dear Marquis," said the king, "I did not know that you had such an impressive castle and so many well cultivated lands. I am delighted to have met you personally, and also to give you my daughter's hand in marriage. I cannot imagine finding a better suitor for her." A few days later, the princess and the Marquis of Caraba were married. A splendid feast was held to celebrate that event, and right behind the newlyweds, wearing shiny boots and a magnificent feather in his hat, was the clever cat, who lived happily ever after at his master's side, and was henceforth called the Puss in Boots. The end.